The Ottawa Charge, did they just get lucky or did they underperform in the regular season? We'll talk about that, plus news around the PWHL on today's Women's Hockey Report.
This is the Women's Hockey Report presented by Locked On NHL. Your weekly look at the world of women's hockey. From the PWHL to the international stage, it's the Women's Hockey Report on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, women's hockey fans. Welcome to another episode of the Women's Hockey Report, part of the Locked On NHL Network. That is a part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Erica L. Ayala here alongside Rachel Donner, and we cannot wait to get into our next deep dive. We're doing a team-by-team deep dive, and today it's all about the Ottawa Charge. Before we get into that, though, I want to tell you that this episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. All right, Rachel, we've got a lot to talk about when it comes to this Ottawa Charge team, and I teased it in the beginning. I mean, we're going to do the recap first, then we'll talk about key additions and losses. We'll also, of course, get into some PWHL news. We've got a coaching hire. There was an event here in Seattle where I am right now. But first, we have to talk about Ottawa. I mean, again, was this a team that just underperformed in the regular season? Did they get lucky to even get into the playoffs? I mean, I think you could, depending on what game, what day, look at it either way.
Yeah, I think I'm still shell-shocked a little bit from the overtime games that they had to withstand in order to get there. But I think that it's all of those things, right? There was a lot of inconsistency, especially early on. Now, you know, they had to deal with huge injuries with like Emerance Maschmeyer in particular. Now, they got extremely lucky that Gwyneth Phillips took over in net and didn't miss a beat. And she's like, when you talk about a goaltender stealing games, like she is the epitome of that experience, right? And so I think, you know, they got the right scoring from the right people at the right time. They won some low scoring battles that Phillips kept them in order to get them there. But man, some of those periods of hockey were frightening at best from the Ottawa Charge.
Indeed. And, you know, this is a team, Rachel, that we've seen. They could run up the score early on, and then you were just kind of, you know, gripping your armrest for the last 10, 20 minutes of a game sometimes. So we're going to break all of that down, because are the good things, are we going to see them repeated in the upcoming season? Are the things that were inconsistent, are we going to see that repeated in the next season? Some of the things that maybe were a little bit of luck and circumstance, can they find and harness that lightning in a bottle? We're going to try our best at this point in the off season to answer those questions. But first, you know, let's just break down, you know, what this team lost in expansion. We've talked about this a few times generally, but in our team by team breakdowns, obviously we get to you know, pull a little more meat off the bone. But I mean, I think with a team that again struggled with consistency, at times struggled with scoring, there are some names on these the players that they've lost that make you wonder, what are the Ottawa Charge going to do?
Yeah, I think, you know, on the forward side of things, they lost a couple of veteran leaders, I think, that were extremely important to the team culture there. I would say Cheyenne Darkangelo is one of those players, you know, and she may not contribute as much on the scoreboard, which she did, don't get me wrong, but I feel like she's just one of those players that is a glue player that holds your team together. She was, of course, signed by Montreal in general free agency, but in expansion, they lost Danielle Serdachny, who was, I think, one of the tone-setting players of this Ottawa Charge team. And you just, like, she was everywhere all the time, every single time she was on the ice. And I felt like you heard the play-by-play say her name just constantly. Yeah. And so losing that kind of energy and production is a huge hole here.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, you talk about culture, and I agree with you when it comes to Cheyenne, Darkangelo, Sardakny as well. But then I think if we just focus on again, impact, I think specifically from a culture perspective, Ashton Bell and Aneta Terelova on the blue line for me, Rachel, really stands out. I think Terelova was working overtime when it came to keeping some semblance of consistency of structure on the blue line, and was helping facilitate, right? And break out of the defensive zone and get the offense going. When the Charge were in transition, I think that's some of the best hockey that we would see from them. And for a time, Terelova was a huge part of that, Rachel.
Absolutely. And what's wild is if you look at the Ottawa Charge lineup from the final against Minnesota, the entire right side of that blue line is gone.
That's
like
wild.
it is incredible. So Ashton Bell, you mentioned expansion draft, went to Vancouver. Terelova went to Seattle. And then Zoe Boyd signed in Boston in free agency. And so, Jinsey Rose was also signed by the Sirens in free agency. We kind of knew that was coming for life reasons for her. But still, like, the whole right side just gone. And we'll get into it, but the way they chose to fill the blue line is very interesting on that front. But you have those top defenders who were hugely impactful in the playoffs for them, not there anymore. I think they're going to have to rebuild the defensive structure. Luckily, the system is still there because Carla McLeod is still there. Right. But I think putting new players into that system is going to be an interesting challenge for her.
100%. And then, I mean, I said that one of the high ticket items, so to speak. That sounds weird because we're talking about people. One of the people that I was definitely keeping eyes on when it came to free agency was Ottawa's leading goal scorer with 15 goals, and that is Teresa Vanisova. And another player, Rachel, that leaves in free agency. Also, Natalie Snodgrass. Now, we didn't really see breakthrough and cut her teeth with Ottawa, especially last season, but is a scrappy player that maybe with a change of scenery, actually here in Seattle, right, might be someone that, can find her way. But Vanisova, I think, is huge. We talked to Teresa Vanisova, right, in Raleigh, talking a little bit about that fight and how and why she would never do it again, which I think is such a logical answer. Like, you want me to go bare knuckles into someone's cage or bubble? Yeah, no, thank you. But I mean, that right there, at times, she seemed to be, the only one that could really rev up the engine. Maybe I'd say probably alongside Brianne Jenner, who they did retain. We'll talk a little bit about that. But I mean, also, I'm completely biased because I've been pretty high on Vanisova's game for several seasons now, before predating, I should say, the PWHL. I mean, this is a player that can just be 100% clutch for any team that she's playing on.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think she was we can talk about when we get to Vancouver what her addition there is going to look like. But I do think that in some ways this could lead to a more disciplined Ottawa team.
Yeah, that's fair.
In the end. But remains to be seen. Again, Carla McLeod's system kind of lends itself to that scrappiness. So
100%. Yeah, there's definitely a give and take when it comes to Vanisova. We've talked about that. I've talked to Carla McLeod about that. I've talked to Teresa about that. I mean, you take the good with the bad, so to speak. And it's so wild because I think her frame compared to other players is so unassuming that you've got a pepper pot, a firecracker on the ice. So, but I think that also, as much as we're going to talk about Gwyneth Phillips, right, Rachel, throughout this episode, as we do our deep dive into the Ottawa Charge, we also have to talk about Emerance Maschmeyer. Before the injury, I mean, I didn't have any inkling that Mash would be someone that would leave at the end of the season as we are going through expansion. And lo and behold, unprotected, and is now with Vancouver.
Yeah, definitely a surprise if you had talked to 1 year ago us, for sure. But I think the way the season went, Ottawa had absolutely no choice but to protect Gwyneth Phillips. I just think, given how she performed, there was no way around it. And with Maschmeyer, I think, it was easy to say she'll get an opportunity somewhere else for sure. It's not like this is career ending. And
No.
it just kind of made sense.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, again, the injury, it kind of maybe skews how we think and perceive of what was going on there. But Emerance Maschmeyer ended the season with a .913 save percentage, Gwyneth Phillips with a .919. So, I mean, we're talking, like you said, situations and things about how you want to kind of future proof, maybe having an inkling of what Mash is thinking about. Was this something a little bit more facilitated, or at least from Ottawa's perspective, where maybe Maschmeyer did want a change of scenery. So again, I think players have been. It's a little bit of a tossed bag, Rachel, with especially players that were taken in the expansion draft, whether they felt that they knew it was coming or it was something that they wanted to facilitate or not. But I get the sense that this might have been a situation, like you mentioned, where it's okay. It's okay to kind of move on. And Emerance has always and continues to, quite honestly, say nothing but wonderful things about Gwyneth Phillips. So I think kind of seeing the writing on the wall also, if you're MASH, gives both players an opportunity to get significant minutes, which they deserve. They both deserve.
100%.
Yeah. So those are some of the losses in expansion or free agency. But again, there's a good crop of returners. And so we're going to talk about those returners before we then talk about the additions that came either through expansion or the entry draft. So I mentioned one name for sure was going to be coming back, and that is Brianne Jenner. Now, actually, not protected originally, Rachel, which you and I disagreed with. I was like, I think you have to have Brianne Jenner protected, but it worked out still on the squad. But just as a reminder for folks, protected in the expansion draft, Emily Clark, Gwyneth Phillips, aforementioned, Ronja Salvalainen, and Gabby Hughes ended up being that fourth player that they were able to protect because of all of the losses that they took in expansion. But Jenner, Katarzyna Mrazova, another great player, has
huge returner.
Huge. Has all the sandpaper of Vanisova with more discipline. Just wasn't healthy. Wasn't healthy last season. And I still think she got absolutely rocked on what ended up being the last play of the season, or right before the last play, the last goal of the season. So very curious to see how Katarzyna will come back. We have Taylor House, Rebecca Leslie, Anna Mexner, and Manon McMahon also at the front. And then also, Rachel, several blue liners coming back as well.
Yeah, Jocelyne Larocque, hugely important first pairing defender on this team. Gotta have her back. I like bringing Stephanie Markowski back. I think the continuity alone is going to help kind of solidify the blue line there. Sam Isbell gets kind of an upgrade from the reserve player list to a standard player contract here, and Jessica Adelson also signed. So I think, they're doing what they can, but we'll get into how it plays out.
Yeah, and you mentioned some of the one-year deals on the back end, the blue line. Also, Logan Angers, retained for another year. Didn't see much of that of Logan, but has been with the team. Just want to go back to up front. Katarzyna Mrazova, Rebecca Leslie. Those are 2-year extensions. House and Mexner, as well as McMahon, those are 1-year deals. Okay, so when it comes to, before we move on, Rachel, when it comes to these returners, who do you think has to have a really solid season or even above average season if Ottawa wants to be able to perhaps find their way back to the finals?
I mean, I think McMahon, who had a really solid season this year, she's got to become, again, more of the glue of this team. I think she's already very popular, but and I was like very relieved to see her sign and come back here. But I do think that Mrazova is going to have a bigger part. Rebecca Leslie is going to have a bigger part here. But I do like Jocelyne Larocque is going to be, I think, one of the huge leaders of this team and is going to basically like be the person on defense. I know Savalainen is there too, and she's fantastic. And there's a reason why they protected her, and I was 100% behind that decision. But I think just as far as pure leadership, Jocelyne Larocque is the blue line leader there.
Yeah, and this is perhaps a way to segue into our next segment here, but is one of those players that has to have a great year Gwyneth Phillips again? I mean, that's a big question with this team, because is that are we teetering on you're grateful to have a young star break out, to is it a little irresponsible to have your young star and your goaltender be the one that's carrying the weight of this squad? So we'll break that down coming up on today's episode of the Women's Hockey Report.
Ever wish managing your money felt easier with Monarch Money? It can, whether you're growing your savings or planning a big purchase. Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money is more than a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center where you can track your accounts, your investments, and spending all in one place. So in addition to managing your money, you're also building wealth. And the thing that I love about Monarch Money is it helps you keep track of all those day-to-day expenses, so you can reduce unnecessary spending on things like takeout, but it also at the same time helps you plan and budget for big purchases like a new car or a new house all at once. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNHL for half off your first year.
We are talking all things Ottawa Charge on today's episode of the Women's Hockey Report as part of the Locked On NHL channel. If you're not already subscribed, please do subscribe to the Locked On NHL channel. You can check out the women's hockey playlist that we have. Also look for the purple accents. That's how you know it is a WoHo Report episode. You can also, of course, follow us on TikTok, the Tiki Talk Rachel, at women's_hockey_report. We also are on Blue Sky. You can find all of our handles in the description and in the show notes. All right. So we talked about who the Ottawa Charge lost by way of either free agency or the expansion draft. We have also talked, of course, about then players who are returning to the Canadian capital, at least. Now let's talk about the additions through free agency, Rachel, as well as the entry draft. Let's start with free agency first. We'll talk about the players, but then also just overall, I'd like to hear from you, Rachel. What do you think about the movement? Does it move the needle enough for this Charge squad?
Yeah, so they got a couple of New York sirens in free agency, one on the front end and one on the back end in Elizabeth Giguère and Brooke Hobson. I think obviously they needed to shore up their blue line. there.
Yep.
And Elizabeth Jaguar, though, I think is an interesting signing because, she only had 2 goals and 2 assists this past season with the Sirens, but I think, was a strong part of that Sirens team. And I'm very interested to see when there's maybe less of a responsibility on her shoulders, how her game changes in Ottawa, because I think she'll be part of a stronger offensive lineup there. And I think that'll allow her to play her own style a little bit more. They also signed Emma Bergesen, who is from Norway, so not a PWHL player. And she is the only right-handed defense player that Ottawa has right now. And that's like wild to me.
Yeah, I mean, it really makes matchups interesting to say the least. So, barring anything that happens after we record, which a lot usually happens, Rachel, after we record, we'll talk about some of those things that happened after our last show. It could, again, make matchups interesting. It could make facilitating the puck a little bit interesting. So, another thing, I just want to go back to Jaguar. I think as a Patty Kaz award winner has had, I don't know if you want to say completely disappointing, but certainly not as splashy of a pro career, even predating the PWHL, than I certainly was expecting. And I don't know, is it that there's this expectation for Jaguar to be a little bit of a playmaker? Maybe that's just not her game or the game that she can play at the pro level. But I do think also that Jaguar, yes, the situations, the circumstances, and I do think that there has to be another gear that she's able to hit a little bit more consistently.
Yeah, and that's why I think this will free her up a little bit to do that without as much of the weight of a team on her shoulders as she might have been experiencing in New York.
That's fair. I mean, New York had a lot going on. I mean, you
future
look on,
future show.
Exactly. We'll get there. We'll get there eventually. So we won't waste too much time on it today. Okay, so 3 picks in 3 players taken in free agency. And then, of course, there was the draft. And that's where they are doing most of their work here, at least as of now, when it comes to the offseason to lock things up. So, Rachel, let's run through who they picked in the entry draft, starting with their number 1 pick, or their first round pick, 5th overall, a defender.
Yeah, Rory Guilday, who just signed a 3-year deal, which is a good sign. I think she's going to be a top pairing defender on this team straight away, coming out of Cornell. Again, she'll probably have to play on the right side because there is no one else. But I believe she can do that. But so I really love that pick for them in the first round. They had to go with defense, and they did there. And then they made some interesting picks in terms of trying to shore up other things. Of course, like as is expected with Carla McLeod's involvement in European hockey. We have some Europeans here in Anna Shokina, who is supposed to be a phenomenal player, and her teammate from over in Russia, drafted late in the 6th round in Vanisova Kadyrova. I think both of them have signed. We'll see what their impact is, but I think Shokina in particular will be a significant contributor here.
Yeah, definitely an interesting pick here, as you mentioned, bringing a little bit more of the European style, someone who knows the international games. So at least when you look at some of the Olympians or players that have played in world championships, someone that Shokina, has played against for sure. Although, again, being from Russia, that has looked a little bit different, Rachel, in the last handful of years. So that too, I wonder what impact, if at all, not having as many international games in most recent years is going to impact truly any player, again, from Russia. But I think also you look It's just Guilday that they pick up as far as a defender. Everyone else a forward, and then also pick up a goaltender, Sani Ahola from St. Cloud State University. Signed last week. We've talked about goaltending. Obviously, that's the story in a lot of ways with this Ottawa Charge squad. But if you think about having someone under Gwyneth Phillips, we talked about Angers, Phillips coming back, the presumptive number one, a young goaltender, 5th-round pick, 37th overall from a school that traditionally you're not seeing them necessarily break through in the standings. But as far as goaltending, honestly, sometimes that's where you find, a little bit of a diamond in the rough because, hey, they know that they're going to get shots. They're going to face a lot of shots usually.
Yeah, and I think there'll be some opportunities for both Angers and Ahola there to get some backup opportunities, and maybe both of them will get some games. I truly believe that, the way that the breakdown is going to go, and I think it'll be good for both of their development.
I would agree. So if we look, though, at the last lineup coming from the finals, that first line is intact, and I think that makes a lot of sense. We talked about McMahon, but Hughes and Clark, and I know you were very high on bringing Clark back, and I think for good reason. We definitely saw that in the postseason. Just your thoughts about keeping that top line together.
Yeah, I don't know that they're going to do that. I think they'll keep Hughes and Clark together for sure. But I think the opportunity to slide McMahon back over to center makes a lot more sense here.
Right.
And maybe they're going to put Jaguar on that top line to try and kickstart her offense there. But, it could just as easily be Brianne Jenner, although I would honestly split Brianne Jenner off onto a separate line just to spread the wealth in terms of the talent there. But I think they're going to try multiple things for sure.
Yeah. And then speaking of Brianne Jenner, at least if we go off of what we saw in their last game, Vanisova, Darkangelo, no longer there. So you have to find a spot for Jenner, or, really find people to play alongside Jenner. Katarzyna Mrazova with Leslie and Mexner. That's another line that, at least in theory, right, stays together. And as you mentioned...
Yeah, I think they're going to get split up. I really do. Just because I think they're going to have to move Mrazova up to 2C
I think
in this circumstance. Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. That's already a lot of sandpaper between Jenner and Mrazova. And so, like you said, then, does that move McMahon to that 3C?
Possibly. I think depending on the game and the matchups, you're either going to see McMahon at 2C and Mrazova at 3C, or vice versa. I think it'll just depend on how the chemistry works over the course of the season, and how, honestly, Shokina plays, because there's a potential for her to earn a second line role, but I'm guessing in her first year it's going to be a third line role, just in terms of player development there. So I think, with the chemistry, potentially putting Shokina and Kadyrova on the same line, with McMahon or Mrazova, depending on how they decide it works best, is probably how it's going to go.
And so you talk about Kadyrova and Shokina. Do you see any other draft picks being able to make, the kind of that, I guess what now would be kind of the bottom six?
Yeah, we might see Sarah Woznowitz. Apologies if I butchered that name, but I think she has a shot. We'll see what happens with Peyton Hemp here. She doesn't have a contract as of recording, which means she'll sign it immediately after we stop recording here. But I think, that's a possibility for sure. Also, not sure what's happening with Alexa Vasco, who got playing time last year. So, as a returning player. So I think it'll depend on some of those other returning players and how the camp battles play out.
For sure. with defense, we've alluded to it before, but we have a stacked left side, strong side.
Yeah.
But and again, you kind of hinted at this, but if we look at the returners, who do you think maybe Carla McLeod can mix and match here a little bit?
Right. I would put Larocque with Guilday just because I feel like the mentorship alone and with Larocque kind of steering the ship, so to speak. And Guilday, who's a tremendously talented hockey player, I think can work around what Larocque is doing really well. I think Savalainen would then be paired up with probably Markowski, but maybe Bergeson earns that role. I'm less familiar with her game, so I don't know where she'll end up falling in the pairings here, but I think that's kind of what we're looking at with maybe Hobson and Bergeson as the third pairing here. But again, Sam Isbell or Jessica Adelson could potentially crack the top six too.
Yeah, and I mean, we've talked about goaltending. It's going to be Phillips, right? So we'll have to see there. I think another thing, Rachel, and it's not something that we can answer necessarily on this episode, but something to keep an eye on is, can this Ottawa Charge team get better on special teams? I mean, that's another thing that if you just kind of look at where they fall, they're in the bottom two for both the power play and the penalty kill, dead last with a 14.9% clip on the power play in the regular season, and the PK at 80.2%, just ahead of, the champions, the Minnesota Frost. In the playoffs, when you look at their numbers, pretty much the same, not even double digits when it came to the power play at a 5.6% clip. The PK also second to last, but also Toronto had a really, really, really bad PK. Everyone was over 80%, and Toronto didn't even get to 45%. So, yikes. That's tough. So we'll get to Toronto eventually. So again, just something that I'm keeping an eye on. How are they going to utilize Gwyneth? Is she going to have to be the go-to once again, like we saw on the back end of the regular season? Obviously, in all of those overtimes in the final in particular, but then also, can they shore up a little bit of the inconsistencies? Talk just about special teams, but the penalties at bad times, taking bad penalties at bad times, was also not great.
Right. And I think, having other goaltenders there that are not Emerance Maschmeyer, who are younger, newer to the league, they're going to have to shore up defensively and
100%.
learn how to play in front of somebody that's not Gwyneth Phillips, who's going to save their bacon,
100%. It's going to be interesting. I think that there are definitely enough pieces, returning or otherwise, to make this a competitive team. And it goes back to, we haven't talked really much about Carla on this specific episode, but we were really ready to be like, this has got to change.
She was on the ropes at
100%.
several points during the season.
We were getting real close, real deep in that 10 count. So can she, like a la Rocky Balboa, just find another gear, so we'll see. But coming up next on the Women's Hockey Report, we're going to wrap up with, as we said, there was some news since our last episode. So we'll talk about signings. We'll talk about a new head coach. It's officially official now for Boston. And then I'm in Seattle, so I'll talk a little bit about a season ticket holder event that PWHL Seattle hosted right here in the Emerald City for their new hockey team. All right, Rachel, it's the off season, and that means that transactions are still going down. And we definitely had some after our last episode. As I mentioned, I'm in Seattle in part to catch up with PWHL Seattle, but maybe we go with the big news here. New bench boss for Boston. How about that alliteration? Huh.
Yeah, it's Chris Spar was hired as the new head coach of the Boston Fleet, and his last job was with the San Diego Gulls in the
Mm-hmm.
AHL as an assistant coach. He has not been a head coach anywhere, at least for quite a while. He was in the OHL with Flint before his job in San Diego. He was an associate coach there, doesn't have any women's game experience. And, as we've said before, it's not a requirement to have a women's game experience, but it can't
It
hurt.
helps.
It really helps to understand the players, the playing field, the environment, the culture. Like, there's a lot to it that's different than the men's game. And
100%.
like, obviously these guys that are taking these jobs are applying for them, and they understand that it's going to be different, but it always gives me a little bit of pause.
Yeah, 100%. We've talked about this before. And, I think that there are examples of coaches that have come to the women's game from the men's game as players, which of course is something that we see just in coaching overall, or
Right.
even just having coaching experience with junior hockey at some level. Chad Wiseman stands out to me. Really did a fantastic job with the New York Riveters. They were the New York Riveters at the time. Really took the time to get to learn the players, to have conversations, and they went from, worst to first in a matter of 3 seasons. Then you also, look at Colton Orr, someone who, at first I was like, hey, who's this guy who's like missing the first part of the season in his first year to be on Dancing with the Stars Canada, right? But
Yeah.
he turned out to be someone I know,
Oh,
right?
what a time. What a
That was a
time.
time. That was a time. You look at Paul Mara in Boston. Those are just some
Uh-huh.
examples from the league that preceded the PWHL. So again, we say this not to be like, I can't believe it's a man. I mean, although maybe some of that, but it's a little bit more
It's
nuanced,
a
right?
it's a
It's
man coming from the men's game.
right. And there have also been examples in women's hockey, including in the PWHL. I've spoken about this before. I think New York, especially with Draper, right, seems like a good, sweet human, and a little over his head when it came to being able to make the adjustments appropriate and necessary by knowing the women's game, or learning it on the fly, so to speak, but also just didn't really seem to have a good handle of his personnel. So here's the thing. You don't come from the women's game. Okay, no big deal. What's the expectation, Rachel, if you are a woman? So literally at this point, just Jessica Campbell, if you are a woman coming to the men's game, have played with your national team, have worked as a scout with PWHL Ottawa, do you think
Listen.
they're gonna be like, oh, you can learn about Maddie Beniers and Riker Evans when you get here? Absolutely not. Of course not. The expectation, I would assume, and maybe this is on me for making an assumption, right, Rachel? I would assume that you have to come in and learn your personnel. Like, you have to know something about your personnel. Of course, you get to know them in real time. You have conversations, because that's what you should probably do as a human. But do your research. And there have been times, not everyone, not all men, but there have been times where I felt that a man head coach or GM has come into the women's game and really just not bothered to know who, I don't know, Alex Carpenter is.
Well, I mean, we know who Alex Carpenter is because of her relationship to
Right.
her
Well,
father on the
beyond
broadcast.
Yeah.
But that aside, I think that for me, bringing up Jessica Campbell is really apt, because Jessica Campbell started as an assistant coach in the AHL and has worked her way up to being an assistant coach at the NHL level.
Yes.
And so I think, she benefited in some ways from, traveling with a head coach from the AHL level to the NHL level. But
100%.
that being said, there is an expectation that you work from the ground up for her entry into the men's game. And I know there's a lot of like former women's players who are now scouts in the men's game.
Yes.
Like they're everywhere. They're everywhere right now.
Yeah.
And so I can see them kind of growing into player development and then coaching, but that's a ground up thing.
100%.
Chris Spar is going directly from a lower level role in not the top tier of men's hockey into a head coaching position in the premier, ostensibly the premier women's league in the world. And that's where I find the disconnect to be. That, you know, why is he not coming in as an assistant coach?
Yeah, I mean, all questions, and maybe we will be proven wrong, right? Again, it's
Love
happened.
it. Do it.
It's happened
Prove me wrong.
before. I've mentioned a few guys that have been able to do that and make that jump. But you're right. This is set to be the premier women's professional league in the world, and that was by design, right? That was the whole purpose and intention of the players leading up to this league. And you have to have coaching that can match, that can hold, you know, that can hold water. So you have to be able to do that. And it's just something to put out there. I guess, you know, that's why we play the games, Rachel. We'll find out soon enough. The cream will rise. And the other part of this conversation that I want to say, because I don't think it goes without mentioning or without speaking for everyone, like you said, there are now more opportunities for women, even on the men's side of the game. And it's the constant struggle once we see women's leagues at all levels, coaching, general managers, you know, C-suite, e-board owners. If women were good enough, right, to compete and play for their Olympic national team and they have aspirations to coach, then why don't we see women coaching more in the women's game? And I think there are a lot of ways to answer that question, including stability, whether it's the stability of the league that we're talking about, but also the stability of someone wanting to make sure that they can take care of their family. And that comes with pay. Equitable pay is not something we see in women's leagues. Until, you know, men come in and then we get our first $1 million coach in Becky Hammond, $1 million plus coach in the WNBA, and then a guy with nowhere near her credentials is now making more than her. But anyway, I'm not salty. It's fine. But again, now I'm talking more historically, but these are just things, these are trends that I keep an eye on. It's not saying that that is what's happening. It's just saying that, you know, I've watched this movie trailer a few times before, Rachel.
Listen, that's completely fair. And I think it's with all of these kinds of hires, it's like, you're not going to get the benefit of the doubt until you prove it. And
Right.
That's just really what it is from me.
The 100%, because, you know, fair is fair. That's what women deal with, even when their resume would suggest that they 100% are qualified. But so we're just
nice
gonna have to
Legend of Billie Jean pull there.
Hey, wow, what a movie! Great.
Fair is fair.
Yeah. What was that Pat Benatar movie song that came from that movie? Which one is it? This bloody road remains a mystery.
Yeah, that's it.
What's that one called? Is it Invincible? Is that the name of it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
This sudden darkness fills
the air.
Anyway, we do have other news. It's not just a karaoke session, I promise. So signings, Rachel. We have a trio of signings. Some pretty solid names on this list.
Yeah, so in addition to a couple of those Ottawa draft pick signings that we mentioned, with Rory Guilday being the last minute signing there before we started recording here, we also have in Boston Lauren Gable, huge returnee. I think there, you know, I think she's going to have a lot more opportunities this year to like take that next step forward with Boston. You know, we'll see how the new coach uses her. In Minnesota, we have Marlene Boissonneau, goaltender, got a 1-year deal, so she'll be the third goaltender there. And Alex Labelle re-signed in Montreal on a 1-year deal as well.
Yeah. So, lots of 1 year deals, folks shoring up their rosters, but then also, we've talked about a handful of times camp invites. I think we'll start seeing even more of those as we get closer and closer to the fall. Lastly, before we close out the episode, it was great seeing some fans of the show, Rachel, at the season ticket holder event for PWHL Seattle.
Nice.
An exciting time. I was just in Indianapolis for WNBA All-Star, and then I get a message being like, hey, I know that we have you scheduled for these virtual interviews, and do you want to come out to Seattle and catch up with the team here? And I was like, yes, I do. Let me wash my clothes and pack them right back in my suitcase. But just a great showing. Rough and Tumble hosted. Jen Barnes, the owner there, co-owner there, co-founder there, also hosted a panel where we got to get to know the players a little bit better. Hillary Knight, of course, was there. Kayla Barnes was in market for a little bit, but not at the actual season ticket holder event. So just a great way for the season ticket holders specifically to get to know some of the players. There was a autograph signing after, some people saying, hey, I don't have anything for you to sign, just wanted to come say hi. I love that. The excitement is real. Hillary Knight in particular and the rest of the squad, they were at the Seattle Storm game on Tuesday. Hillary Knight threw out the first pitch for an afternoon game, at least Pacific time, at the Mariners game. There were some hiking festivities and activities that happened yesterday.
I saw some fish getting thrown around.
Yeah, that's right. Fish were yeeted at Hike Place Market for sure. You got to stop there. The absolutely disgusting bubblegum wall was also a stop. So I don't understand. I don't know why. I don't know why anyone would ever do that. It's like, give us the worst of like everything from elementary to high school desks, right? And put it on a wall.
Those are some traumatic memories right there.
So you understand. You feel
or like,
me, though.
The subway or something.
Oh, no, thank you. No, thank you. But I mean, do you, Seattle? It's great. I love it here. It's amazing. No, but it was a good event. Also, it was teased with no timeline, which was so cruel that some of the hats because there was a giveaway PWHL Seattle hat, there was like all kinds of swag, and they were like, hey, get your PWHL Seattle merch now because it's going to be vintage soon, which seemed to me, Rachel, like a little bit of an Easter egg that they might be dropping a name. Are we going to get team names? Maybe.
I'm excited for that.
Yeah. It sounds
better not be a Friday news dump, though. I'll tell you that.
Oh, my gosh. Yeah. Immediately as we close our recording, they will announce the name because that's just how it goes. But no, overall, it was a great event. I'm not sure. I haven't heard of anything similar happening in Vancouver, at least not yet, but we'll definitely keep our eyes and ears peeled for that. What the event signals and the energy that I felt is that people are like, yeah, we're getting closer to training camp. We're getting closer to the fall and when the puck is going to drop on what will be season 3 for the league, but of course season 1 for the PWHL Seattle team. I did speak to Megan Turner a little bit about this team and the construct and even the relationship with the Seattle Kraken, who they will be sharing facilities with. So we'll have some of that as bonus content. But if you want to hear my conversation with Hillary Knight, that episode of the Locked On Kraken podcast is already up. We also will have Kayla Barnes on in the coming days. So you'll be able to watch the full Locked On Kraken episode, but we'll also have the full interview, the standalone interview, video and audio over on Locked On Kraken. And you'll see some of the clips on the Women's Hockey Report if you follow us on TikTok or keep an eye on our playlist on the Locked On NHL channel. All right, Rachel, lots of questions, I think, for this Ottawa Charge team. And I think still manageable for them to maybe find themselves in a good place in the league standings.
Yeah, I think so too. The question will become like, who's going to unseat the Frost and the Charge next time around?
That's right. We started with the top two dogs, but we're going to continue our deep dive. We know, of course, we have Montreal and Toronto that played in the playoffs but couldn't get over the hump. We'll break down those teams as we continue on. And I believe we are going Montreal next, right?
Yep.
All right. So we're Montreal fans. This is your time. Let us know in the chat or hit us up on social media if you have burning questions or comments that you want to discuss when it comes to all things Victoire. We will do our deep dive on the next episode of the Women's Hockey Report. But for now, for Rachel Donner, my name is Erica L. Ayala. You've been listening to the Women's Hockey Report. Thank you so much for tapping in, and we'll catch you next week, next Saturday, every Saturday, on the next episode of the Women's Hockey Report. Peace out, everybody.